Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's talk, Do It Pro Bono with Aaron Hurst, right over here. This talk is part of the Optimize Your Life initiative. Are folks familiar with Optimize Your Life? Yeah. So it's, again, the global initiative that aims to provide Googlers with education and programs to help them and their families to get and stay healthy. So actually, for folks on VC, if you could mute, that would be great. Thanks. So to see all of our upcoming Health at Google speakers and topics, check out Go to OYL. And also, let's see if we can move this along. We do have a survey where we'd love to get feedback from folks on this talk, on other talks that you'd like to see as well. So if you can just, at the end of the talk, go to Go Health at Survey for a 30-second survey and let us know what you think. So I'm pleased to introduce Aaron Hurst, a globally recognized social innovator and leading architect of the growing pro bono services movement. Aaron's career is dedicated to challenging and empowering the private and public sectors, as well as individuals and organizations to drive our collective social, environmental, and economic progress. So a lot of work going on over here. He's the founder of the Taproot Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization building a national pro bono marketplace and leading the global service movement. He's widely known for his thought leadership in civic engagement, nonprofit management, and corporate social responsibility, which is definitely something Google's very interested in. He's also both an Ashoka and a Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation Fellow. He's also been formally recognized as a leading social innovator by the Aspen Institute, the Commonwealth Club, and many others. Aaron currently serves on the boards of Reimagining Service and BoardSource. He's also a featured blogger for the Huffington Post. And he's co-authored the children's book, Mommy and Daddy Do It Pro Bono, which a lot of you guys have grabbed out here. And he did that with his wife, Kara. And after the talk today, Aaron will be graciously signing books. So if folks are interested, you can just come over to the table. And that is quite an intro for quite a man. So please join me in welcoming Aaron.
Thank you, Christy. It's great to be here. I'm actually going to go back up to this one. Which topic am I? I was looking at these different logos. You got cooking. Is the first one's cooking? Cooking, fishing. So you have like fishing classes, weightlifting, religion, and dancing. Meditation. So it's probably the weightlifting. Who can bench press 150 in the room? Is there? No? Yeah. Got one. Well, thank you all for coming today. It's an honor to be here, and it's great to see Google investing in sort of you as whole people, not just as employees and the work you do from 7 a.m. till midnight, but the work you do in your own life between midnight and 7 a.m. So it's just great to see that they care about those few hours. So thank you. I also want to thank Google for all the support you've given the Taproot Foundation over the years through AdWords and other philanthropic programs that you guys do. So much appreciated, and it's been great to have you as a partner in our effort to make pro bono service part of what it means to be a business professional. And I wanted to try to explain sort of quickly what Taproot is before I go through my whole spiel, but we actually have a plant, Stanley, back here. Stanley, you want to stand up for a second? This is Stanley. So Stanley actually just came up to me right beforehand, and he actually worked at a nonprofit called Oasis in Oakland, right? Which is a recipient of 3 pro bono service grants that the Taproot Foundation did for his organization. One was around how to install a Salesforce database for them to help fundraising. One was around branding and marketing for the nonprofit, and the third one was around their HR systems. And this is really what we're all about at Taproot, is helping business professionals help nonprofits with critical functional needs. And Stanley can tell you how horribly it all went, but that he still loves us. So you got now like an example of someone who's now a Googler, I think as you call them, but who came out of the nonprofit sector. Hey Seth, what's up? So anyway, I just give you a sense for who we are. So I'm going to be signing books, but I wanted to start off by doing a little reading of a couple of the pages of this book. And I'd actually love 2 volunteers. This would be like an opportunity for service right here. We got one. Come on up. He has an organ for LA, it looks like. Is that a heart? Stomach. Like Godzilla. I love that. Need one more. come on up. So we're going to do a reading, and I think you guys will do better justice than I will. So actually, if you come on over here where the microphone is, I'm going to page through this. And your name, sir?
Josh.
Josh, you are now 7 years old, and
Marianne.
Marianne, you're going to be a parental figure today. So I'm going to go through each of these, and if you can just read the child part, and if there's an adult part, you can act it out or whatever you feel moved to do. So here's the first one. This is for engineers. Yeah, come on up so they can...
My daddy is a computer programmer. He makes it so you can find things on the internet. He also built a website for a group that helps to save elephants and other animals.
He could work here, except for he probably would have a better computer, but it's a little dated. Well, let me just rotate. We'll do the next one here. So the next...
So I'll be the child again.
Yeah, go. Let's just do that. I forgot that it's just all over.
My daddy makes ads for companies to help them sell things. He says it is marketing. I saw his ad on TV for a new car. He volunteers to help foster kids too. This is a sign he created to help some kids find a new home.
Fantastic. Got a couple more here. Sales. Show us your best sales voice.
My mommy,
It's a child.
A little bit deeper. Like you really mean it.
but as a child.
Yes, of course.
My mommy is a consultant. She flies around the world to help companies solve difficult problems. She took me to this play. She helped them get more people to come to the theater.
What a mom. I think this is the last one. We'll let you
Okay.
close with dramatic flair.
Okay. My daddy is an HR manager. He helps to hire people for jobs at his work. He uses his skills pro bono to help injured soldiers get new jobs when they come back from war.
Thank you. That was fun. Did anybody have any acting tips for them? Just anything you'd like to see improved for the next one? And you guys are into professional development, so I want to make sure. Pretty good. Okay, thank you both. I appreciate the reading. So my wife and I created this book a couple years ago because we both had little kids. We had just had we both, of course we did. We had little kids, and we realized in reading children's books that there were two things that were missing. One was that every children's book was about astronauts, ballerinas, policemen, and firemen. There were no kids' books that were about the jobs of a lot of the people that we knew. And a lot of those people, like if you're an HR manager and a kid asks you, what the hell is an HR manager? Which is how my kid probably would phrase it. There was no way of describing it or talking about it. And it really was a disservice because therefore like every kid wants to be a fireman and like none of them are inspired to be great HR managers. So we saw a need for that. The second piece was that there weren't books about celebrating not just what people do in their office setting, but what they do to use their skills to make a difference. And about setting that precedent in the eyes of a child. And realizing that marketing is not just about selling cars, but it's also about using marketing to help that foster kid, as we talked about. So we realized there was an opportunity here for a book that pretended like it was for kids, but really was for adults to help them have that conversation with kids. But also our hope was to inspire parents to think of two things. One, what would your child, how many of you actually have kids in the room? I know at least one. Fantastic. Breeding, I love it. Breeding smart people, I love it, that's good. There's actually a guy, it was actually up in Menlo Park, it was a lawyer originally actually inspired this. He said, I asked him, why do you do pro bono work? Why do you, on top of working 70 hours a week or whatever it was, why do you go out and do pro bono work? And he said it was because his kid, who was like 7, asked him what he did for a living, and he said he didn't like the answer. He said, I wanted to figure out how my kid looks at what I do for a living and making sure they felt great about what I do. But the secondary piece is he reflected on himself at 7 and the dreams he had when he was 7 of what he wanted to be, and then looked at what he was actually doing and saw a midlife crisis coming, right? Where he was suddenly going to realize he'd gone off on this track and hadn't fully invested in his values and who he is. And what's wonderful about pro bono, it's not about quitting your job to go become a nun. It's about doing the great work you do in a commercial setting at your job, but realizing that you're developing skills and giving those back in a much broader setting to drive social impact and having those things blended into your life. And that's really what this book was all about. So I'm excited to be signing copies afterwards. And hopefully it'll lead to discussions with your own kids about what you do. It has other professions in there. These are some highlights. So it does the closing thing in the book. What do your mommy and daddy do? So I just encourage you as you think about, your life to think about that question of how you want to answer that question. And it's a really profound, it's the most simple but most profound question because it is, again, both the voice of your child and your inner 7-year-old that's in you thinking about and judging your life, which is probably the most judgmental voice you can possibly have. So the big message I want to leave you with today, I'm going to go through a number of slides here, but does anybody know who these two folks are? Yes. The Peanut Gallery from the Muppet Show. That is exactly right. They represent the old white guys. So we sort of always think about as sort of like traditionally involved in leadership, traditionally involved in philanthropy, etc. And they had, these guys specifically, but most people, this idea that you should learn, earn, then return. How many people have heard that expression? Learn, earn. Seth has. Joel, that's it? This is great. I'm going to dispel a myth you did not even know was a myth. I mean, how often do you get to do that? This is fantastic. So there's a conventional thinking in American business that you should first learn. You go to school, you get in debt, you learn a lot of stuff, right? Then you stop learning and you start earning. And you should just dedicate every waking hour to making money, and someday you're going to be fabulously wealthy, and then you start to return it back to society, right? That's sort of this, there's a general philosophy. And if you go to Wall Street, even, I think here in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of that attitude of, I don't need to worry about giving back now because later on I'm going to have so much money I'll be able to give then, and that's what my goal is, to like accumulate wealth so that someday I do that stuff. Well, let's just wait until then. Now I've got to make money. So there's like 100 flaws with this logic, right? The first most obvious one is that if you get hit by a bus at 24, you never got to like experience the wonder of giving back, right? Because you always assume there'd be the next day, but not everyone's going to be able to make it there, and also you may not be able to, due to life circumstances, be able to return. You're not going to be the next billionaire. You're not going to have the resources you think you're going to have. So it's also based a lot on this false premise and optimism of like, I'll always have more later. Things are hard now, but I'll always have more later, which is also a fallacy. It's also a fallacy because it's based on the assumption that you should stop learning when you graduate from college or business school. But that's sort of your learning opportunity, and then you're just like going to go work, which I think also in the contemporary business world, you have to learn every day. You have to learn how to be better at what you do. You have to learn more about yourself. So what I really see and what I profess is the idea that you should be learning, earning, and returning every day of your career. That every day you should be looking at what can I learn today, what can I give back, and be able to obviously pay the bills so you can send your kids to school and make sure they've got food on the table. But that we need to integrate these things much more into our lives and as part of our identity. Does that make sense? Is anyone in the room an economics major? Sweet, we've got two. So you have to help me with this one. This is a visual for it before we get to it. But this is a basic idea of present value of service. So The Economist, the idea of present value, does that ring a bell? Yes. What is like at a high level of present, what does it mean? Share with your fellow Googlers. So to repeat that, basically you take something that in the future of value and you discount it to what it'd be worth today. So for example, the way I think about it is if you invest $100 in the stock market today versus $100 10 years from now, you will have accumulated all that hopefully additional return over those 10 years. So that $100 is worth more now than doing it then, right? So the basic premise here is, and this goes to the learn, earn, return piece, your serving right now has a much bigger impact than if you do it 10 years from now. If you wait till you retire, you'll have much less of an impact, not just because of the volume of what you do, but the compounded social interest, if you will, of that service. So this image, I think, illustrates it well, which is, this is a picture of New York City in about 20 years when the streets are fully flooded from global warming, right? So it shows like what it's going to look like once the sea level rises and all the streets become flooded. So if you think about it, if you right now work with an environmental organization to help combat climate change and fight to save the ozone in our natural environment, we might actually prevent that water from seeping up onto my streets of the city I live in. Or 10 years from now or 20 years from now, we'll probably need you to volunteer to be like a gondolier for people going to the hospital, because they'll need like a gondolier service to get to the hospital, right? So the impact of your service today is infinitely more valuable than it will be in 10 years. Another example of that, and these are hyperbole, obviously, you take a kid, like a disadvantaged kid who's in a tough spot, has a lot of things going against them at, say, age 4. You could be a mentor for them today and like try to help get them on the right track and help support them. Or if you wait 20 years, you're likely going to be doing what I did, which was teaching creative writing to inmates in a prison, to that same kid, because at that point, they'll have gone down a path, or may have gone down a path, where the options for how you can serve them are so greatly diminished. So again, this is why the idea of waiting till you're later in your career to make that difference fundamentally is going to mean that you have less of an impact than if you start today. This is my highly technical economics graph to show that, which basically shows, I got to redo it, it's terrible. The bottom orange line represents sort of the trajectory of an issue, right? So it could be global warming, it could be kids' life. And basically, if you start your intervention early in that timeline, and you have that trajectory, you actually end up making a much bigger difference, versus if you start with that same intervention or a similar one later on in that life cycle, like you don't end up making as big an impact. And it's not just due to the effort, it has to do with the trajectory of that return. And this is really important, I think, to just understand the present value of service. Not to wait another month, not to wait another year, not to wait till you retire, but knowing that a small thing now will have a bigger impact than a big thing later. Any questions about this graph? Does anybody know what the cosine of it is? So I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is a specific issue of education, which is something that I care a lot about because I have kids. But just to give you a sense of like the diversity of skills that nonprofits, whether it's a school, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a government agency, what they need from people like yourselves. And this is just a representative sample, but you take like marketing, right? Nonprofits are in desperate need for marketing because they do incredibly great work, and Stanley can back this up. They do great work, but you wouldn't often know from reading their materials they do great work. Like there's such a huge delta between the reality of their work and the materials and the way they describe what they do. And it's partially a resources issue, but it's also, I used to work in the technology, and it's also the engineering problem of engineers aren't good at marketing their own wares because they think every little detail matters, and they have trouble figuring out what the thing is that like is the real selling point, right? Similarly, if you're a nonprofit program manager who's doing work with people, you think every little thing you do for them is like so important that you couldn't possibly leave that piece out, and therefore you become a terrible spokesperson because you don't know what the real core story is, right? So having marketers come into an organization and help tell the stories, figure out what the core messaging is, to tell that amazing story is incredibly powerful. Management. So few nonprofit executives have training in management. Very few for-profit ones for that matter as well, but it's even worse in the nonprofit sector. And and strategy, and being able to put together real strategy, being able to really do the research behind strategy, to be able to do the people management of an organization because it's so resource constrained. So being able to help bring that kind of thinking and mentorship. And mentorship is one of the best ways to do that. Information technology, I mean, we talked about Salesforce. That's a great example where so many nonprofits we go into are still using Excel spreadsheets to manage all their donors, which works when you have like 10 of them, but it gets to a point like at around 13 and a half where it just becomes impossible to manage. So the need to be able to help with technology, it's much better than it was 10 years ago, but there's still so much need at a basic level, and then at a transformational level, there's even more opportunities around rethinking your programs and how do you actually like run your organization in a different way by leveraging technology. Design, this goes to that same point about marketing. If you look at the logo or the actual visuals of a typical nonprofit, it often looks like it was done by a high school student, and yet the work they're doing is like a postdoctorate, like incredible sophistication. And it's such a crime because I think it not only serves them poorly, but it actually erodes confidence overall in nonprofits. Because we tend to think that represents the quality of the work they do, and it doesn't. And it actually hurts our society at a much broader level, not having that kind of design resource for nonprofits. And then finally, HR. this is one that's like a personal passion for me, just because nonprofits are fundamentally in a people business, but so few of them have the systems to support their people effectively. We did a focus group a couple years ago with about 10 nonprofit executive directors, so the CEOs, and we just asked, how many of you have ever worked in an organization that had like a functioning HR department? Not one of them raised their hand. There's just a fundamental issue of not having sort of even seen what it looks like to even know what the systems are. And I'm the first one to criticize a lot of HR practices that are overwrought, cause all kinds of issues, but there's some really core pieces just around doing performance reviews and setting that up and helping set goals for people, making sure you're optimizing what their benefits can be, training around how to be a manager. There are some really core things that organizations don't even necessarily know how to access those resources, and being able to bring in an HR professional to do an audit of their overall HR practices and suggest some of the key ways that can move forward is transformational for them. So has anyone done any of this kind of work for nonprofits? Seth has, a little bit. What a great opportunity for you guys to get out later this afternoon and do some of it. But this is so critical. This stuff is so needed, and unlike doing traditional volunteerism, it has a much greater impact. Which goes to my two friends here, Jill and Jim. So this is based on data that's out there now, just talking about if you're going to do service, why doing service using your skills is so valuable. And Jill, she works at Google. She's smart. She does pro bono service. Jim over here works somewhere else, not quite as swift. And he does volunteering by painting things, right? So the data shows that Jill provides 6 times more value than Jim. So when she's using her skills to do work in the community, she's providing literally 6 times more value for society than Jim. She is 3 times more likely to gain material job-related skills. So actually learn things about how to be better at her job. And she is 5 times more likely to make an impact overall. Where is it? Social impact is Jim's company, like overall as part of that broader program. On the flip side, Jim over here, he's 25% less likely to develop new internal relationships. You actually build more relationships internally in your company by working with your peers on skilled projects than if you do it for non-skilled work. Jim is less likely to be satisfied with his experience. And this is surprising because people often say, yeah, I should do skill, but like, I want to get out there and just, enjoy the sun. I want to do something different. It'll be a lot more fun. But people actually report being much more satisfied when they're using their skills because they know they're making a bigger impact. They're more engaged, and they still get the psychic rewards. And most importantly, Jim is 100% more likely to get paint on his suit, which probably is not as much of an issue here because I don't think anyone's wearing a suit. But you have some nice T-shirts and sweatshirts and stuff, so it applies the same way. So this, again, as you think about both for Google as a company, but each of you individually, leveraging your skills is just, from a business standpoint, from a personal standpoint, just a much better value proposition for you in terms of going out there and doing stuff. Any questions about that? Does anyone debate like the 100% paint on the suit stat or anything? Not one, okay. So I want to give you a quick sense of where the state of pro bono is. So as Christy generously shared, I've been leading this movement around pro bono service, and wanted to give you a sense for where we've come and where this is now. And Seth knows some of this stuff. Can you guys in the back read this okay? Or probably not, but you can pretend. Be generous. I just want to share a couple of these statistics that I think are really interesting, just to catch your imagination. On the left here, you see the number of projects delivered by Create-a-thon 73 agencies. It's 2,500. So Create-a-thon is a program where ad agencies basically shut down for 24 hours. So basically from 9 a.m. till 9 a.m. the next day, like literally around the clock. And they bust out websites, logos, brochures, annual reports for nonprofits. And they have 73 different ad agencies that have signed up for this and have delivered over 2,500 projects for nonprofits. And it's amazing. Like the people on this just love it. It's like such a great team building activity to all get together. So one thing you could think about is like getting a group of your colleagues together and just thinking about like, what could you do in a 24-hour sort of sprint helping nonprofits around something. There's another technology one called The Nerdery, which I think is a fabulous name, out of Minneapolis that does this around technology. And they just do 24-hour sort of just builds. I'm going to go over here to the 5% in this bubble. AIGA, which is the American Institute for Graphic Arts, so it's the trade association of graphic artists. They've set a goal now that all graphic designers and graphic design firms should give 5% of their billable time to pro bono service. So you're seeing this starting to actually get adopted by the professions writ large, like in a really fundamental way. I mean, 5% is a lot of time, especially for a services business. 20. The number of top 25 business schools that have pro bono programs. So we're getting to the point now where just about every business school is making pro bono part of the experience of getting an MBA. And we're going to start having more and more students graduating who expect to be able to do pro bono in their work. It's incredibly exciting. Capital One is a company that's done an incredibly great job with this. Capital One started this a couple years ago in 2008, and they've served 125 nonprofits through their company. It's not a consulting firm, it's a bank, a credit card company and a bank. But they actually set it up so that each of their departments, like technology, legal, real estate, et cetera, each took on a couple projects a year for local nonprofits. And it's a really fabulous model, and it's coordinated across the whole company, but enables them to make a real difference in the different fields. And it has the heads of each of those departments really taking ownership in a really powerful way. I want to share the two, I think, most challenging stats. The first is the bottom here. It says 3%. That's the percentage of nonprofits that report having access to the pro bono services they need. So only 3% of nonprofits in this country feel they have the resources they need on a pro bono basis to help them achieve their missions, right? Like, that's a pretty depressing thought, right? I mean, or huge opportunity. On the opposite side here, the word access. The number one barrier of nonprofits to getting more pro bono is access. If you're a nonprofit executive director, you don't know which companies offer what, you don't know who to ask, you don't know how to scope and state what your need is. So there's a huge need, not just for pro bono, but for helping nonprofits really gain access. So one of the things you could do individually is just mentor a nonprofit to help them think about what are all their needs, and think about in your network, whether it's a virtual network or your sort of people you work with, how to help them source and get those people to meet that need. So that simple act of being a matchmaker and helping them gain access solves for a huge part of this 3% problem. Because in our experience, people want to do pro bono that just don't, no one ever asks them, so they don't know where to go. So helping to be that matchmaker is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Taproot Foundation at this point, you see here in the bottom middle, we've done over 1 million hours of pro bono service using pro bono consultants from across the country for nonprofits. It's been incredibly rewarding just to work with these thousands of business professionals that each give 100 hours of their time to help a local nonprofit in the arts, education, the environment, et cetera. And that's really where we learned about how to make this all work. We also now, and Stanley and I were just talking about this, we now work with over 25 companies where they hire us to help them build their own pro bono programs, because we realize no matter how big we are, we'll never be big enough. So we are working with companies to help them build their own programs so that they can help the sector. Because this 3%, I mean, if Taproot was wildly successful, we might get to that to like 4%, 5%. Like, we'll never be big enough. But if companies adopt us, we can really make a difference there. So we see a lot of growth there. Any questions on any of? So my challenge to you, and I'm going to open up for questions. I find that much more engaging by definition. I know you guys recently launched Google+, which is fantastic, even though no one's invited me to be a member of it. God damn it. Clearly labeled as a late adopter, I guess, or very unnetworked. But I want to challenge you to think a little bit differently about the definition of this, and think about it more in terms of yourself, and think about what you do at Google, but what you should do plus, sort of as a plus on top of that, right? So you have what you do every day, again, from 7 a.m. till midnight, but to think about, you know, what you do is that plus. What is the plus that you want to have in your life to really make yourself that parent who has a great answer for their kids, but also to be able to satisfy the 7-year-old inside you that's asking, you know, are you on the path? Are you doing and being the change that you want to see? Are you proud of who you are as a total person? And are you really learning, earning, and returning every day? And if not, how do you get that plus to be part of your experience as a Googler? So with that, would love to open it up to any questions people may have, if any. I don't want to force questions.
What's your email address for a plus invitation?
It's Aaron, Aaron, at taprootfoundation.org. Sweet! I'm going to be busy the rest of the afternoon figuring out what to do with that, so thank you. Yeah, please.
So what is the access point for if I'm interested in doing something, is there Taproot in place that you have all the projects that are needed, or where does the place lead?
Yeah, no, great question. So I think there's Taproot definitely is always looking for marketing, HR, strategy, finance, professionals in the Bay Area, DC, New York, Chicago, and LA. So, we'd love to have you come join us and be part of that. I think alternately, thinking about who you know that are on nonprofit boards and ask them, like, are there needs that they have, or is there any way you could help? Is a way you could do it on a personal level. Seth, is there anything like at Google you'd point them to, or I should be?
I think we're building out the capacity. So I think Aaron's leading the movement, and the Taproot Foundation is leading the movement towards pro bono service. And I think we're at Google trying to build out capacity. But there's a lot of internal research for you to go volunteer.
So, and I was reminded that the microphone, I need to make sure for the people not here to repeat that. So the original question was, how do you get involved? And I'd asked Seth sort of, what are the opportunities through Google? And Seth's really working to try to get more of a formal pro bono program up at Google. So the best thing you can do to support him is harass him and all of his chain of command to do it faster, so that we can get that going here. But, I think Seth also in the short term probably gets conversations with random nonprofits that are like, gosh, I wish I had a X, Y, or Z. So, I think also just letting him know that you're interested will help.
One quick plug on that.
Yeah, plug away.
So there's actually a program that's been developed right now for sales, and we're going to be rolling it out to the rest of the company. It's this 1% time. Have folks heard of this? Yeah. So right now it is focused on skills-based projects, and there's over 300 projects. So if folks are interested, go to go/1% time or go/sales 1%, and there's a lot of stuff there. So definitely take a look.
Cool. Great plug. And sales is a key area that nonprofits need help with. I think it's less on, it's sales skills, and it's also sales operations of like running, like how do you do pipeline management? How do you like manage overall to like forecast your revenue, et cetera? These are really critical skills that a lot of nonprofits can really benefit from. There's a question, yes, in the middle there.
So I pretty regularly go to the school or church or whatever.
Yep. So I think so the question is, this Googler often goes to schools and churches and does volunteering, doing more manual labor, and asks, says that she is in technology and couldn't they be leveraging her skills? And they generally say, yeah, you know what, that fence really does need painting. Why don't you just, code that fence with some paint? I think it's interesting. I think there's a couple different pieces to that. I think one is a question of who you're talking to often, and finding the right person who actually knows where that pain point is. I think a lot of times people don't know how to use you. So being able to say, would it be helpful for me to come in and do like a diagnostic up front of just how you're using technology overall, and see coming out of that how to help? Because often they just don't even have that upfront work done, and it's not hard for these organizations to find someone to paint a fence. I mean, there's volunteer match. Every company's hungry to find fences to paint. I mean, in fact, there's a great story of a nonprofit in DC who has a room that exists solely so companies can come in and paint it, because companies are so hard up for things to paint. So they just paint it every week a different color as different companies come in. So I think it's not often the case they actually don't have the access to that labor to dig the ditches or painting. I think if you're able to go in at a more strategic level and say, can I help do an assessment, you'll probably uncover it instead of saying, what can I do this right out of the gate? Because they often don't know what that entry point is. The other problem is the sector in general has a problem of people volunteering to help and then trying to find jobs for you instead of vice versa, having them say, here's what our needs are, and then finding the people to meet that need. And it's much easier to find people to paint as a general rule because you don't have to have specific skills. It's hard to think about where you need people otherwise. So the biggest, just to underscore, the biggest value you can provide up front is to say, you have access through Google to 26,000 amazing people. You'd love to get more of them involved in that school. Can you help them identify where those opportunities are so that next time someone says, no, just paint that fence, they can say, actually, we have all these other needs. So I think you can really help them cross that chasm. Because according to all the surveys, nonprofits consistently need skilled people way more than they need manual labor. They just don't know how to get it or how to use it. Yep. It is across a lot of different sizes, and I've seen the same data across those different, I haven't seen it around religious organizations, but it's definitely been the case around schools. It's been around, nonprofits of different sizes, and their needs vary somewhat, but it's pretty universal. I mean, sometimes with schools and things that are, if they're public institutions, so actual government organizations, they may have more rules around what they can and can't do with volunteers given unions, but every school I've ever interacted with is in desperate need for help on all those fronts. It's a question of having the help to manage it. And if you can go in and start with the question, let me help you manage it by figuring out what you need, you help them unlock that potential. Yeah, Stanley.
So I just want to thank you for coming out here and listening. So as Aaron kind of mentioned earlier, the nonprofit that I worked at was called Oasis, and it's basically an after school program in Oakland. So while Oasis is great at working with kids, being at the school, a lot of what Aaron's organization does and what they're really good at is finding professional volunteers to do pro bono work in areas that we're not experts in, areas that nonprofits are experts in, where we don't have anyone who can build a website, we don't have anyone who can implement a Salesforce database, which would help us grow and find more donors, know who to reach out to, and all those different things. And from our first grant in 2006, so we got Salesforce, and I think they're one of the actually first recipients of the Salesforce Taproot grant.
Yep.
2010, when we got a marketing, branding, and grant, they like grown tremendously from being in San Francisco down to being different metropolitan areas. So I really just want to thank him for coming out here. And if there is kind of like a nonprofit where you guys have skills that you guys want to connect with, Taproot does a great job at finding what your skill set is, matching you with a project, and then having you go from point A to point B with project timeline and everything else there. I know that many people probably when they want to volunteer at an organization like Oasis, they want to play with the kids and do things like that. There will be opportunities to. Many times for marketing, for example, the folks who come in, visit our site, they take a look at what's going on in the program, they learn about the organization, and it really helps them figure out a marketing plan or putting it together a brochure. Deciding on whether the name needs to be changed, deciding on what colors, what tagline, how to really grow the organization. When the organization is not doesn't have structure.
So thank you, Stanley. That's nice. In terms of, I guess I have to try to summarize that for the Taproot is great. Get involved. Is that? Yeah. Okay. There it is. I couldn't do justice to the full spiel there, but no, I think we've really spent the last 10 years creating a model to make it really easy for you to make a difference, and to really start with the nonprofit's needs first. So we hope that is an opportunity, if you guys are interested, that you would embrace. But I think there's a lot of other ways to go about doing it. Any other? No gotcha question? Yes, that's got one. Good.
So part of this was built as sort of something to do with your kids. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your kids and how do you involve them in pro bono services? Are there examples you've seen as you're leading this movement of the way in which parents involve their kids in the service that they're doing? Because it's easy to go out and paint fence with my 3.5-year-old.
Yeah.
It's not as easy to involve her in a strategic, implementation.
Your kids probably aren't very smart. That's the reason. My kids can do that, so I don't know what. I think that's sort of your issue. Is there another question? No. No, it's a great question. I think this is one of the challenges in general of looking at. I think the broader ethic around pro bono is about giving what you know and what you do best, right? And obviously, Seth, for you, that's different than my 3-year-old son, who's really good at killing ants and wrestling with kids twice his size. Like those are the two things like he's exceptionally good at. I think there's two different pieces. I think there's the issue of inspiring your kids and being a role model, and thinking about pro bono service in terms of a way to be that role model, to be that that hero to them, and to have that value transmitted to them, and to find ways to have them witness that, not just have you tell them that. So, if you do work for a nonprofit, see if you can bring them on a site visit and show them. Because I think a lot of it's not necessarily them serving as much as it is them seeing that you value that, and that even though you're busy, like you make time for that because there's always someone less fortunate than you, no matter how bad your circumstance is. I think that's incredibly powerful as just a transmission of values. I think the second piece is around them actually doing service. And I think you have to be really careful there, again, to not patronize the nonprofit sector, because the sector is not like hard up for 7-year-olds to come paint fences. Like that's not really what they're looking for. But at the same time, I think there are ways to think about what do your kids love to do, and often helping other kids that are younger than them. Like my daughter loves doing projects. She likes painting, she likes beading, she likes doing all kinds of stuff. And her school does a great job of getting kids that are like a couple grades older to come down and like teach the kids how to do those things that they love to do, whether it's reading, what have you, which to me is instilling at an early age that same idea of taking what you love, what you know how to do well, and bringing that to others, in sort of that sense. But it is an interesting challenge. I have the same impulse too. It's like you have a Saturday, you want to like go figure out how to do something that you feel like is transmitting real value. And I think for some of the stuff, to be candid, like some of the direct service stuff is easier for that. I think the challenge is like it puts an onus on the nonprofits to have to host you and that kid, because very few volunteer activities really are best suited for especially smaller children. I think as they get older, that tends to vary. So I don't know. But my daughter is a badass. So she's got. We live in Brooklyn, and she's got a lemonade stand that she puts up pretty regularly. I'm doing a documentary on it because it's just been like such an amazing business. She brings in like $25 an hour at 50 cents a glass. Like that's a scalable, amazing business, and it's phenomenal. Like I think a couple of the local bars are like worried they're gonna have to go out of business soon just because of like the amount of business she's been taking. So she's not that far off at 5, I think, from being able to do some business strategy for you guys here. Any final questions? Yes, Seth.
I'm also wondering, so we get a lot of people who say, I want to do something different than what I do during my day job.
Yep.
I'm wondering, you talk about the present value of service, you talk about sort of the legacy that you're leaving and how to inspire your kids. I'm wondering, sort of, you must get that often where people say, like, I get it, I know that my skills are more valuable doing what I'm professionally good at, but I work 60 hours a week doing that, and I want to do something different when I'm doing my service time.
I'd fire them. Like if they don't love their job and what they do enough to want to like do that in the community, like they clearly aren't very good at what they do. That's my sense of it. But no, I think it has to, I think there are people who really are trying to like use it as an escapism, right? But I think I think there is that percentage of the population. What I find though consistently is when people actually go and use their skills and do it in a completely different setting that turns them upside down, they're surprised by how much they love that and how it feels very different from work. And I think it's, you talk about, I talk with my executive coach about sort of, in life you need your 3 places. You've got your family, you've got your work, and then you need that third place. And I think, often people are looking for that third place, and they're looking at, like, I don't want to do this stuff at work, I want a third place. But I think what I've seen is that people actually have a much more rewarding third place when they bring their whole selves to that experience. And they're not checking out their brain, they're not checking out, like, their intellectual passion, they're bringing that fully to the fold. So it's counterintuitive at first, because they're like trying to create a place away from work. They're trying to carve out that third place, but realizing that their love for marketing or coding or HR, they often never had the chance to express that in a non-commercial setting and realize how radically different that feels when you're doing it in that kind of environment. And I can't tell you the number of times, like, people said it's the most rewarding experience in their career, how many times people feel like they've learned like ways to do things in completely different ways. It's changed their identity because they go from thinking marketing is a commercial thing to suddenly realizing that even though they're in marketing or technology, that doesn't mean that they're a business professional. It means that they are a marketing professional, and that can be translated in a lot of different ways. So my short answer, besides fire them, would be tell them to try it. And tell them that nonprofits are so hard up for this stuff. They've got plenty of people to paint a fence. Like, they're hard up for these needs. Try it and see how it feels. And, not everything's for everybody, but I'm surprised by the number of people who have that sentiment and then sort of have that turned around. Yeah. Any final heckling? Well, thank you all for making the time. I know you guys are incredibly busy, and sharing your lunch hour with me. I hope a lot of you are able to get involved with Taproot, get involved in other ways. Remember the present value of service, and remember that while it's easy to always say tomorrow is going to be an easier day to do it, you never know what's going to be tomorrow, so you may as well start today. So I just encourage you to go to our website, look at the stories, either sign up, find reasons for motivation through that, and show your kids what you're doing. Show them how you are making a difference, and be a role model to them, and really hold that as the bar for you in your career and your life is to be that role model you want to be. So thank you.